1/3 of former employees say they still have access to files from a previous job. This is what emerges from a research conducted by Kaspersky Lab, which reveals there are still organizations acting superficially. In fact, it wouldn't be surprising if those same companies that have left access to former employees have also invested large sums of money in excellent cybersecurity solutions. So the question is, how do you recognize when the cyber threat is coming from an internal resource? Keep watching the video, as we are going to analyze 4 identities of employees who could be committing an insider threat, namely an internal attack against the company they work for. And before starting, subscribe to my channel if you enjoy the topic. When we talk about cybersecurity, we often think about how to protect the company from external threats, don't we? However, sometimes it happens that the enemies are at home, and knowing how to move, they act undisturbed until the damage is so severe as to be evident. Let's think about what happens when thieves break into an apartment. If they have the keys and know the codes, the alarm doesn't ring, right? Well, the same happens for firewalls in cybersecurity systems that don't activate without a breach in progress. In addition, it can happen that employees who allowed an intrusion are not even aware. Such carelessness is related to a lack of proper training, and the resource doesn't understand the risks of certain activities online. When working with relevant information such as patents, strategic data, and personal data, it's critical to educate all employees on how to handle them, even those in seemingly secure jobs. We'll see, for example, that oblivious employees get fooled by phishing or scams that arrive in their email inboxes. On the other hand, more serious is revenge in the form of a cyber attack, in which the fired resource retaliates by destroying information or creating irreversible damage to systems. In short, to protect ourselves, we must learn to know the hallmarks of masked employees. And about it, here's an infographic showing 4 different types of insider attacks from human resources that could pose a risk to the company. We start from the oblivious insider, passing through the negligent and malicious ones until we arrive at the professional insider. Are you ready to do deeper in each of these profiles? Then like the video and let's go! Oblivious insiders don't recognize the value of the data they hold and don't understand the importance of password protection. So they have access to valuable business data, but don't know the responsibilities it creates. The resources which manage the valuable data in the company have been adequately trained not to make mistakes. But the problem is created by employees momentarily accessing data to find the information they need in another business context. Let's do an example. Jane manages a database that contains all sensitive client data. She created the database and therefore knows the value of the information it contains. On the other hand, Jack needs access to the database only to get a shipping address, since he works in the logistics department. He will have the same access as Jane to enter the database, and without proper training, he could casually write it on his smartphone. And if Jack were to lose his smartphone, the access could get into the wrong hands. And the risks increase when we talk about routine activities such as webmail platforms. The frequency of email and its being transversal with all work activities makes it an easy target for both internal and external cyber attacks. As it also happens in private life, the damages of an unconscious behavior can be light as well as very serious. It all depends on how well the company protects its valuable data. Oblivious employees are often caught up in social engineering, meaning they fall into the trap of someone asking for company login information through a fake message or email. In general, when you have information that for privacy reasons cannot be managed internally, it's advisable to train not only those who will have to manage it, but also those who will have to use it. And it's also essential to make your employees aware of the risks associated with IT security from their very first day in the company to ensure peer control. You are unsure if the email you received is fake or secure? Don't hesitate. You can ask your colleague. Negligent insiders can be those who haven't received adequate training in data processing on the one hand, and those who knowingly bypass controls to speed up work on the other. Some data protection procedures require steps that appear to be unnecessary, but instead serve to prevent doors from being left open. Choosing not to follow security protocols can turn into much more severe damage than the efficiency generated by the omission. One estimate found the average cost caused by a single negligent insider exceeds $300,000. Example: Alex works as a social media manager and uses platforms that allow posts to be published and managed across multiple company profiles. As part of his routine work, Alex finds it unnecessary to log in every day, since it's time-consuming activity, so he stores his credential and disables two-factor authentication. The insertion of a security code, on the other hand, serves to identify the person accessing the platform, preventing undesired intrusions. All it takes is a moment of distraction, and any other employee can publish posts in the company's name, ruining the organization's reputation, not the employee. Negligent insiders may allow others to access company data by simply not logging out of company systems. Or they may write passwords on public electronic diaries to reduce search time. Or they may use unauthorized device and application that minimize work time but put the IT system at risk. In fact, the negligent insider, compared to the oblivious one, can be unmasked more easily because bypassing security protocols triggers alarms. By monitoring the activities taking place in the company, it's possible to notice the alert in time and talk about it with the affected employee. The malicious insider acts out of revenge or to thwart colleagues who might steal their job or promotion. In this case, the payback is only personal, and there is both insight and awareness of the damage they are doing to the company. Malicious employees already know the passwords, how to access relevant data, and that's what gives them the power to retaliate. Let's do an example. Paul is part of our research and development team working on designing a smartphone for a well-known phone manufacturer. Some rumors have reached his ears. The boss is unhappy and will fire him at the end of the project. Paul immediately starts interviewing and is contacted by the competition. However, during the interview, he lets slip in some information about the project he's working on. The competitor company plays dirty and assures the future employees the job and a considerable increase in the gross annual salary in exchange for the confidential data of the project. Paul accepts and returns to his company. After the project, as expected, Paul is fired, but a few days into the marketing campaign to promote the new smartphone, the competitor company presents a smartphone with the same performance on the market. Thanks to Paul's suggestions, the competitor realized the product in half the time, as they went directly to design phase, skipping the R&D phase. The risks with the malicious insider are very high, as it's a conscious act. The intention is to do damage to the company through deletion, theft, or publication of data. When dismissing an employee who works with confidential data, many large companies communicate it immediately. That is, the moment the person receives the dismissal letter, they must leave. And leaving the workstation right away is precisely to avoid creating damage in the meantime. In general, when the dismissal takes place without the consent of both parties, it's always advisable to modify the accesses and inhibit those of the person concerned. Here pattern recognition becomes more complex because the professional insider knows well the game rules, knows how to move, and knows how to pass unobserved. Moreover, the stake to put in action a plan so elaborate and complex will have to be very high. The insider in this case will have to evade controls designed to protect data from internal and external intrusions. Usually, a professional insider doesn't act quickly, but builds up ground over time. They can get hired or collaborate as outsiders. They try to gain the trust of superiors and colleagues, and then try to put the plan into action. The return from doing so is not always only personal, as in the case of the malicious insider. Often, the data or information to be seized or destroyed has been commissioned by competitor companies or criminals operating on the dark web, namely the dark side of online. A pro can cause significant damage that is not always reversible. An example might be patent theft. A company that wants to emulate a product or service covered by intellectual property may send an insider to the competition. The professional will need access to the content of the patent to allow the client to reproduce it with minor modifications so as not to risk plagiarism. Usually, the most frequent causes of threats from professionals concern the theft of data to sell to the client. This action is not so easy to unmask because the person could copy the information, not to trigger alarms or alter security parameters. The chances of discovering a professional insider before they commit a crime or cause significant damage to the company are low. A well-designed plan is not easy to stop. Nevertheless, the greater the investment made by your organization to protect the valuable data, the better the chances of stopping an attack. Have you ever experienced something similar to the examples we've seen before? And have you ever met one of these insiders during your business path? Feel free to comment below and share your story. Let's create more awareness about this important issue. Here are some helpful cybersecurity tips. Invest in training to make sure all resources know the risks of sharing information online. Establish roles and permissions for accessing confidential data and documents. By adopting identity and access management logics, each employee will have specific permissions to access the information they need to do their job. Never underestimate the importance of security systems that identify threats and predict possible attacks using artificial intelligence. Always be on the lookout for alerts generated by platforms and suspicious movements such as much higher bandwidth consumption at abnormal times or data passes from a source that does not have the permissions to do so. In summary, insider threats are a reality companies must learn to protect themselves from. So always keep an eye out and remember the identikits. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you found it useful. And if you did, what are you waiting for? Subscribe now to my YouTube channel. Plus, head over to deltalogics.blog and stay up to date with all about the digital world. See you very soon. Ciao!